you want to know who we are or our background, just a little bit more about us, because maybe it makes it easier to relate to. So, yeah, we've been married 15 years. We had 3 kiddos. One of them is in the back. There's some other 2. My background is in youth ministry. I was in youth ministry for 16 years. And Jillian is now a teacher in 4th grade in Eden Prairie. And so just a quick testimony, but it kind of goes to it goes along with a verse in Matthew, chapter 7, 24 through 27, about building your house on a solid foundation. And this is like the before, when I read it for the first time, and then after a little bit. So we're going to look at this verse as reading it as one who maybe hasn't gone through the storm, or at least we thought we had maybe been through some storms, and then some storms hit, and we're like, oh, that's a storm. And then we're going to go through it. So, you want to read that out quick before you jump in?
You want me to?
Sure.
Okay. Can you hear me?
She's a teacher, so it's going to sound better.
This still feels a lot weirder than my classroom, so bear with me. Matthew 7, 24 through 27. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house. Yet it did not fall, because it had its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash. Can we jump in?
Yeah.
So I'm going to share a little bit of my story just over the last handful of years. I'm going to be honest, this feels a little vulnerable because it's kind of recent. So it's still something that I'm still kind of coming through and out of, and I'm just going to lay it out here. Quick snapshot of my background. I grew up in a Christian family, and I've always had what I assumed a strong faith foundation from early on. I've had many deeply spiritual moments with Jesus throughout my life that I've continued to build my security and my belief in Jesus and what the Bible teaches. God's been overly gracious to me. He's given me a very easy and comfy life. Paul and I went to a small Christian school, university in South Carolina, where we met. I studied intercultural studies to be a missionary in Africa. Turns out God decided to, instead of taking me to Africa to love and serve kids like I was hoping, he brought me to Eden Prairie Schools, which has a large population of East African students that I get to love and serve every day, which is really kind of a cool circle. Paul and I got married young and had our 2 first kids right there, Declan and Maggie, without any difficulty, which was a huge blessing. However, when we went to try for our 3rd kid, we got pregnant and we lost the baby really early on. Though I know miscarriages are unfortunately very common, I was hit with a huge amount of grief that deeply affected my faith life. And when I say that God is gracious and has blessed me with an easy, comfy life, I still believed that at the time. I never expected God to prevent any struggles or storms happening in my life. I've always known and was very grateful for how blessed I've been, but I still wrestled with some really big why questions. These weren't questions of why would this happen to me and why all those things. It was more revolving around the promises of the Bible. Like Psalm 34:18, people would always give me when I was grieving. It was, the Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. And other similar verses that seem to say that I would feel God's closeness in the midst of the struggles or the trial or the storm. And that's not what I really experienced as a feeling, and that was hard for me. I wasn't prepared for any type of grief journey. This was the first type of grief that I had ever experienced, and that clearly doesn't just suddenly feel better when you read a couple of Bible verses. And I think I was expecting to feel more of that comfort, and that's just not how it was. And so I took a long time to dig deep into my questions and read more and start at like just square one of my faith foundation. And it was almost like a checklist of starting with, do I really believe in God? And I like paused there and just okay, check, yes, I think I do. And then move on just through my basic foundation again. And through his promises, even if I didn't experience them the way that I was hoping to. Fast forward a few years later, my faith was challenged again when I got my first teaching job the year after COVID, which was super challenging, and during some pretty tense political seasons with very strong opinions from friends, families, coworkers, and on both sides of all extremes, as I'm sure you've experienced too. This led me specifically to spiral into a lot of disappointment with people, with sin, with knowing that I'm also no better than anyone, just with myself. I didn't realize how deep my faith foundation was wrapped around the people who helped me build it. And it's frustrating when you see trusted and loving mentors fail, and it really scared me. Maybe my foundation wasn't as strong as I had originally thought, and maybe my foundation was in my feelings of closeness to God, like I was expecting to experience with the miscarriage, or trusting others to be consistent and set good examples, and when they don't, it was shaking. So as I'd been wrestling with these two faith-shaking experiences, I am trying to figure out how I can genuinely still connect with Jesus, and to have a vulnerable relationship with him, because that is really what I believe that our faith is about, is the real genuine relationship with him. But I noticed a new trend around me start to emerge. And it was that people that we were close to in our different circles started to walk away from Jesus because of their own stories and experiences, and deciding that they didn't want to have anything to do with Jesus or Christianity. These people were in our small group, in our church, in our workplaces, in our inner and outer circles. And as tragic as that was to watch, it also sparked a really intense fear in me of wondering if all of my struggles and wrestlings have been leading me toward a path that is similar, of walking away and deciding that I don't believe in Jesus and all of his teachings that I've been taught to believe my entire life. This is definitely my biggest fear, because all of my life and purpose are wrapped up in Jesus and in my identity in him. And if that fell away, I would have absolutely no idea of who I am, what my purpose is. And that would also just lead me to more big why questions that probably wouldn't ever have any answers. So as I was processing with Paul about all of these different things, that we talk a lot about it, and one evening about my struggles with my relationship with God, I just realized that I really needed to face that big fear head on before I could move forward. And if I was afraid of losing my faith, what would that look like? Does it seem accurate? Does it feel right? Does it feel freeing, as so many others have claimed to experience? And when I finally put my place in just facing that, it was very, very vulnerable and very embarrassing, because I didn't, all of my background just tells me don't lose your faith. Anyway, so then when I got to that place, I just had this visual of, if I was walking away from God, that I was just breaking his heart and hurting him so deeply of me walking away. And I wanted, or my first gut reaction is to feel guilt and shame of, here I am, I'm hurting him again. And this is my sin, and this is my failure in my faith. But the visual was so powerful, because I had this aha moment that God was still there, and that if I was afraid of walking away, God was still in my foundation and my core belief. It was me hurting him, but it was this beautiful moment where God was saying, your faith foundation isn't gone. You do still believe that I am here. And I just, this led me to have such a breath of fresh air, to know that even in the frustrations of specific situations, unmet expectations, and my own fallen and broken understanding of who he is, that my foundation hasn't gone anywhere, and that I can still continue to grow in a better and closer understanding of who he is and how to move forward. Some of my house probably did need to be stripped away, like trusting or relying on my feelings, or that people are sinful and broken, and any type of foundation of relying on them or myself will fail, and that there are times that we might need to re-examine our foundation and make sure that it is truly founded on Jesus. So,
Thank you. So we're going to come back to that. I'm going to share a little quick about mine. Okay, bye. By myself. Okay. Alone again. That was a little bit of her faith journey over the recent. I'm going to share a little bit about mine. It started about 12 years ago. Our second kiddo was on the way. We just signed to buy a house, our very first house. And then a couple weeks, we had signed the contract, non-contingent, because it was a crazy market. So I was like, I'm just going to go for it, non-contingent, we'll just go for it. And then I started a brand new job with Treehouse, this youth outreach organization where I had to raise my own income. And they said, by the way, if you don't hit your income goal by the third month, we'll have to just let you go. And I was like, I just bought a house. What? And I just started freaking out. And of course, the second kid's on the way. And Jillian didn't have a job, and I was making youth minister money, which, contrary to popular demand, isn't a whole lot. I thought it would be good. It's modest. But basically, I just buckled down, and I bootstrapped it, and I was like, all right, I'm going to try harder. I'm going to make things work. I'm going to get past this immovable fence. I'm going to push this big rock up the hill, and I'm going to make things happen. I'm going to do it the way I've always done it. The only problem was I wasn't as young or as squishy or bouncy as I once was. When I fall, things cracked. I didn't bounce and get back up. So anyways, stress started to overcome me, and I stopped being able to deal with things well. I started dealing with things poorly. And it started with stress, and then it went to insomnia, and then it went to trying to medicate to get past the insomnia, which led to crappy mornings, which led to me suffering at work or something else like that, and basically I started spiraling out of control. And I got to the point where my body was so racked with stress that I couldn't stand up straight, and my ligaments were tight, almost like you're like physically ill. And this happened slowly over the course of 3-4 years. And then I started having heart issues and chest pain and all this stuff, and I was like, I don't understand it. I've run 5 5Ks this week. I don't understand what's happening. And so in one evening, my heart's going nuts. It's like beating all over the place and not even in order, and I'm having chest pain, so I'm like freaking out, and we have a turbo high deductible, so I was like, all right, I just need to bite the bullet and go to the doctor. So I went, and unfortunately had a very, very green physician's assistant who wasn't quite a doctor yet. And if you are, great, but just take a lesson intact when you're talking to your individual. So I go, and they hooked up to all the chest monitors, they rushed me right in, and basically the synopsis was, well, I don't know, you seem okay, your heart seems okay, your blood pressure seems okay, but I don't know, you're a male and over 35, so heart disease? And she just threw that out there, just dropped a bomb right on me. And immediately I had a first category 5 panic attack, which I'd never experienced before. And it just sent me into a terrible downward spiral that lasted another 2 years. But that night I went home, and I was like, wow, I felt like I just received a death sentence. And so I didn't really talk to Jillian when I got home because I was just still trying to recover from the news I had gotten. And so I waited for everyone to go to bed. And we had 3 kids at this point. I waited for everyone to go to bed. And then after my kids fell asleep, I crawled into bed with each one of them and just wept. And I did that for 2 weeks straight. And then I got all of our passwords in order because I do all of our finances and stuff. So I got all of our passwords in order, and I transferred some money, and I was like, I'm going to take out life insurance, and I'm going to try to set them up. And of course, if you've ever heard of a self-fulfilling prophecy, it actually got way worse. I was dying. Things were starting to shut down a little bit. and I thought I was dying. And so I was like, self-fulfilling prophecy, here it comes. And then out of a sheer act of desperation, we are part of this other ministry called Family Fest, and it's this great, they do camps and retreats and stuff like that. And I heard that one of the guy's brothers was a doctor. And I cornered him in the storage room, just me and him. And I closed the door behind me, and I was like, Rich. He's like, yeah, who are you? And I'm like, my name's Paul. You don't know me, but I know your brother. And I heard you're a doctor. And he goes, yeah. And I was like, can I tell you? And I gave him the thing and the heart stuff, and he goes, oh, that must have been the chapter your physician assistant was reading that week. And I was like, what? And he goes, let me ask you some questions, Paul. You married? I go, yeah. He goes, okay. Kids? I was like, yeah, 3 of them. He goes, oh, okay. Mortgage? He goes, yeah, okay. Really stressful, tough job? Yeah, okay, yeah. And then he went to another one, and he goes, Paul, you're exactly where you're supposed to be at this age. And I was like, but why am I dying and stuff like this? He goes, you just got you got misdiagnosed. And I'm like, and of course, I'm still at my absolute lowest bottom of the barrel. And I was like, he's like, what do you need? And I looked at him, I said, I just need somebody to put their hands on my shoulders and to look me in the eye and tell me I'm going to be okay. And here's this guy who met me awkwardly 3 minutes before. He puts his hand on my shoulders, looks me in the eye, and he's like the age of my dad. He says, Paul, you're going to be okay. And I just lost it right in his shoulder for like what was probably 10 seconds, but felt like 10 minutes. And I was like, okay, maybe I'm going to be okay. Maybe I can do this. Maybe I was just in a really bad place for a really long time. And that was true. And the reason I'm bringing this up is, and we're going to get to a video clip here in a second, and I'm going to come back to this. But sometimes storms come, and we have no control. Absolutely zero control over our circumstances. There's a death or something else like that. And sometimes, maybe you're in my camp, where you unintentionally caused the storm yourself. Unknowingly. Maybe you built up something that you thought was going to work, or something that should set you up. You met with your guide, Edward Jones, and goes, this is how you set retirement. This is how you guarantee your future. I was like, okay, I need to guarantee a successful route or something to do like this. But it failed. It absolutely failed. And this verse doesn't talk about the aftermath a whole lot. It talks about maybe being on one side where if you're on the sand, you're going to lose it. But what does it talk about when the storm comes when you're on the rock, when you did have the strong foundation? Are we failing? Is this success? Is this failure? What does this look like? So I want to show a quick clip if it works, and if not, we can always describe it. And if you don't really understand the video clip, it's from the movie Twister, the 1996 version, and Matt Schwein will gladly go over the whole video with you. He's a big fan, but I'm just going to play this clip quick if it works. But all right, so a huge tornado came and just ripped the house down, and all they had to hold on to was some pipes that went into their foundation. And I think this is an awesome video and an awesome analogy, because what we know about that verse is a couple promises. The promise is that the storms will come, not if they will come. It promises to seek to destroy, seemingly. It comes to ruin what we had built, seemingly. But what I had unintentionally built was something I thought I needed, or something I thought was the ticket to success, or something that I wanted to try to do. And God's like, nope, you need me. You don't need to work harder. You don't need to invest more. You don't need to try to buy a house unconditionally. Stop trying to do it yourself and putting your foundation in making good moves, and put it in me. because we do know that the house built on the sand gets taken out, the foundation gets taken out, it's gone. But I'm like, Lord, I don't understand why this happened to me. I did everything I was supposed to be doing right, and yet it still came. And what it doesn't talk about is sometimes, what if your walls get torn off? What if your house is down? What if after the storm, all you have left is a pipe sticking out of the ground and 4 corners where your walls and roof used to be? And so talking to my wife Jillian and talking to a few other people, I used to be on fire for God. I don't know what's wrong with me. I used to whenever I was in the grocery store in line, I used to share God with somebody else. Or I used to really, be on fire or think I was doing great. I don't know what's gotten into me. I don't know maybe you're just holding on. Maybe you're in the middle of a storm. And by the way, the verse doesn't say when the storm comes, you're just going to be chilling watching Netflix while the storm's going on outside. You're going to be hanging on for dear life sometimes. So what does successful Christian living look like according to that verse? And that sometimes it looks like having those doubts come in. Just like Jenny's saying, God, you are there, right? I'm pretty sure you're there, right? I mean, my walls are gone. My roof is gone. I thought I knew, or maybe my theology was absolutely wrecked or destroyed but by something I knew or some baggage I previously had. So what if success looks like having nothing but a pipe sticking left in the ground and God saying, okay, I can work with this because you were the one who put up those walls and they weren't really for your benefit, or for our benefit, they were just for your benefit. Those walls that you built didn't necessarily help the kingdom, they just kind of focused on you. And by the way, when we are broken, we're ready to rebuild, it's not gone. That side of the foundation told us where that wall went. This gap over here tells us exactly where the door used to go. We're not starting from scratch. And if it was built on the sand, that doesn't mean we're done. That means you can now go to a rock in Jesus Christ and build that. And my wife and I thought we had our identity and our foundation built on Jesus, but it was a Jesus and my efforts over here. It was Jesus and this career move. It was Jesus and not going through pain or experiencing doubt or something else like that. Sometimes it's necessary to remodel, but you can't remodel without demo. You got to take out the old stuff. You got to let God come in, and you got to let it work. And so for my wife and I, part of our experience was beating ourselves up over and over again that I didn't feel the way I used to feel, or that I'm not as on, I don't feel as close to God, which means maybe I'm out in the desert, or no matter what it was, it's not about our success. It's about God getting us to a place where he can work with us again and building up our foundation again. So what we know is that's a necessary part of the rebuilding process, that when the storms come, we're going to have to rebuild every time. Sometimes maybe it'll just lift up a few shingles. Sometimes it'll take out the whole barn. But it won't be the first and it won't be the last time it'll ever happen again. But that doesn't mean you failed as a believer. It doesn't mean your faith wasn't strong enough. It's an opportunity to find out where your faith really was, and then go bigger and build up from there. So part of us, we're kind of new to this church. And I just want to end with our own passion and our own vision for this place. Without vulnerability from other people, there's no way I would have received healing, and I don't know if I ever would have been here again. I was isolated. I was on an island by myself. I was trying to do it by myself. I ran out of bootstraps to pull, and it was going to be game over. But a couple other people sat me down and said, I know how that feels. I've been battling anxiety my whole life. This is what I do. This is how you're going to make it. Here's some verses to read. Here's a book to go after. And even my wife, someone else had a miscarriage. Someone else had their faith totally doubted. Our vision and our hope as new members of this church is to not let anyone feel like they're on an island as well. And so through the gift of vulnerability and authenticity, we want to hold on with you. in your storm. We want to help you rebuild. We want to help you wrestle with whatever doubts there are. This is going to be a very safe, authentic, wonderful place that we want to contribute to and that we want to be a part of. And so I'm glad Mark had a great idea of getting to know us a little bit. If you do struggle with anxiety, I'm an open book. I can tell you what routes I'm taking now. And by the way, I'm never going to be out of the woods on that. I'm always going to battle with that. And that's okay. This side of heaven isn't for our comfort. It's to let as many other people know that he's got you and that he loves you no matter what. And God's not going anywhere too. Even in the midst of that awful storm and that awful tornado, he was still there, and they're still there. And that wasn't a failure, by the way. Me going through what I had to go through was not failure. That was just the next step. And so, if you're like us at all, please stop beating yourself up over not being where you thought you should be, because maybe God is doing a season of rebuilding. Or if you are in a spot where you thought you'd be, maybe don't get too comfortable. Who knows what's happening? But anyways, I just want to end with that, and then I pray and go from there. God, thank you for being there before the storms, during and after. God, I know after a storm, we're able to see the destruction and the debris, but we're also able to see sunlight again. We're able to see you again. We're able to see what we had built and maybe what was wrong with what we had built. And God, I know that you're with us whether we inflict our own storms or whether a storm just comes. But God, please don't let our own shame or guilt or let Satan come in and say, you're not close to God anymore because of this. You're not close to, well, if you had a stronger foundation, that would have, nope. God, you're starting a new work in us every single day, and every season brings new things. God, we ask for that freedom. We ask for your grace when we fail. We ask for your patience when our house gets ripped off. And God, we ask that we just constantly put our faith back in you and you only. And that's my confession, Lord, as I try to put it in other things too. We love you, Jesus. Thank you. Amen. All right, I can dismiss us, or we can let Mark go.